You're now tuned in to By the Dipshits exclusive content. This is a three-part interview with Jarred Weisfeld O.D.B, last manager. Before we jump into the interview, By the Dipshits want to give a special thanks to our sponsors. What is Galaxy Wells? Galaxy is a metaphor which represents infinite space. Their goal is to dominate the infinite space in the digital publishing universe. Wells are the major corporation that possess endless amounts of content. What do? They turn content into currency in the digital space, the home of the NFTs. You want to keep your ownership and intellectual property? Then stop what you're doing and go to galaxywells.com. Now I'm back to By the Dipshits. This is another episode of By the Dipshits. It's where the dip creates the opportunity. I'm Mills.
I'm D. Lamaj.
I'm JC.
Today's episode, he was rap superstar, legend, Old Dirty Bastard, aka Dirt McGirt, last manager, Jarred Weisfeld.
Just got lucky. You know, VH1, MTV, and Nickelodeon aren't places that, like, if you have a connection, like, if you know somebody that works there, it's not like one of those things, hey, you're coming in, you're going to get a job, right? It's completely the opposite. You have to earn your way to get a job there. They don't just
so it's like a fraternity.
Yeah. I mean, it's so I wound up working on Driven Little Kim. It took me a while to get into VH1, and then I did, and that's how it all began.
Well, what was your first title there? What was your first specific job?
Oh, production assistant. The worst job you could possibly have. Logging tapes, answering phone calls. So apparently, I don't know if you guys remember this, but VH1 was deciding to do a show like called Behind Bars, and it was I think it might have been from the same people that did Behind the Music.
I actually remember that.
It was the premise behind the show was people in jail that, you know, like we're talking about like hardcore criminals. They started bands in prison. And one of, like, there was a mother that watched the promo and saw her daughter's murderer like having a good time in prison, right? So they were all like, the mom was freaking out. It was all over the news. So somehow my VH1 number used to be the main number at VH1, right? So I was getting phone calls from so many pissed off people, and I didn't understand why. So I went to somebody. I went to the guy, the manager of the floor, and I was like, "Yo, Henry, like, I keep getting phone calls from like people that are pissed as hell about some jail rock show." And he's like, "Oh, your number, it used to be the main number. I'm sorry. Just put it on ignore, do not disturb," right? And then they wound up canceling the show and never airing it 2 days before. So I dealt with that. I dealt with like Little Kim. So for example, when you watch a VH1 show or you watch an MTV show or any show, and you see the images that are going 1,000 miles an hour, my job was so I would take those images and I would bring them to a facility that would, you know, create motion graphics based on those images. It was actually owned by Lauren Michaels at Broadway Video. And then we'd come back, and so my job at the end of the show was to literally like figure out exactly how long each image was used for and what clip was used for and log them. It would take about a week to do that, but it was beyond tedious. And then, you know, I'd set up the interviews and, you know, deal with, you know, the record labels and all that stuff to try and make that show happen. Driven Little Kim was an interesting show because it you know, it had tons and tons of people on it, which was good. And at the same time, I was helping out on a show, Driven Kelly Clarkson, right after she won American Idol. And I remember, I think what set me apart was everybody was looking for like a Texas choir group, right? And we had a database and nothing in there had Texas choir group. So everybody's like sitting there and struggling. And I'm like, why don't I just call up like a Texas high school and ask them if they can send us some music? So I call up a Texas high school. I was like, do you think you could send us some music of your choir? And they said, of course. So the next day they had the music for the choir. And that's when they were kind of like, well, this kid is thinking outside the box. Let's let's give him a little bit more responsibility. And so kind of like nothing was handed to me. I earned it.
So Jarred, I know you said production assistant, which is normally called a PA on a set.
Sure.
Yeah. So can you just explain in detail for the listeners what the job entailed, and to you, why was that the worst job or the worst title to have?
Well, it's the worst title to have because it's the least important person on a show that probably does, 40% of the work. So you'd answer phone calls. You'd call, let's say, Little Kim's mom needed some coffee. I'd be the one to go out and get it. Let's say Little Kim was upset because this or that. It would fall on me. The pictures, like, they don't look right, or the voiceover was bad. So the PA is the one that basically goes to everything to make sure that everything is done properly. And if it's not, the PA is the one that gets yelled at, right? You're not going to yell at the producer. You're not going to yell at the AP. The AP is going to say, or the segment producer, right? The AP is going to say, hey, it was the production assistant. I told them to do what they never did. So we'd log interviews. So every time somebody's interviewed, right, you have to take it and you got to send it to transcription. So we'd take the interviews. I'd take it to transcription. We'd get it back. And then somebody would say, for example, I need a video clip of a dog barking while somebody says, thank you. So I'd have to scour all of our tapes to find that clip because that's a clip that they want in the show. So it's as tedious of a job as you could ever get. It's also the lowest paying job you could ever get. But at the same time, the hours are worth it if you put it in.
But you learned a lot. You had to go through. It was the process. I
learned a lot. But what I also learned was that there was no way. So the issue with VH1 is you're a freelancer, right? So after Little Kim is over, you're kind of like in limbo until there's another show that needs a PA. So they call it freelance. The reason why they do it is so that they don't have to give you medical insurance and all that stuff. So they put you on freelance. And after a certain amount of time, they call it permalance. If you're there X amount of time, then they have to start giving you insurance and whatnot. So I was freelance and, I wasn't sure what my next show was going to be or if there was going to be a next show, right? Because maybe they're going to want to do it in LA. Maybe they're not going to want to do it in New York anymore. There were 2 New Yorks. There was 1515 and there was 1633. I worked at 1633. So who knows? Maybe they were just going to consolidate the two. So there's a lot of things going in your mind while you're sitting there and doing these shows, because you're wondering like, oh, am I going to be done in 2 weeks? Because your show ends in 2 weeks and you have no idea what you're doing next.
Yeah, because I was a PA before, and so I know what you mean. And the only thing I really hated, I liked everything else, but the only thing I really hated about being a PA was helping the gaffers. Did you ever have to help the gaffers?
No, you must have been a PA on like music videos or movie sets.
Movie sets.
Yeah, we really didn't have that in television.
Okay.
Let you in on a little secret. Majority of those VH1 interviews you see are done in like a conference room, like a tiny conference room. So we didn't really have a set. So they put a green screen up in a conference room and then they'd ask questions.
So that was part of your journey. I'm sure that molded you, but how did you and Dirty meet, or how did your relationship start? Was it business first or did you know him?
No, so his cousin, John the Baptist, is a very, very good friend of mine. And John, so when I was at VH1, I said, oh, we should do a show called On Parole with O.D.B. So I pitched them a show. And they said, oh, okay, that's great. I was like, they go, do you know Old Dirty Bastard? I was like, yeah, he's a personal friend of mine. Of course I know him, right? Thinking like they were never, ever going to greenlight that show. But my friends had told me in order to get up, move up quickly at VH1, you got to create a show. So I created, it was called On Parole with O.D.B, right? So Brian Graydon, who was the president of VH1 at the time, and Michael Hirshhorn, who was like the SVP of original programming or something. They came back like 2 days later and it was greenlit, right? Now, mind you, I had pitched this to VH1 1515 and VH1 1633 to see which one I can get the better deal at. So here I am. I sell the show. VH1 1515 tells me I can be an EP on it. 1633, where I was working, said I could be a PA on it, a production assistant, right? So basically, I had just created a show, and I could have the same job as I did, right? So I was like, that's bullshit. But there was even a bigger problem. Like, I didn't know Dirty. I had no contact with Dirty. Like, how the hell am I going to get to prison to go see Old Dirty Bastard? So what I started doing was I started mailing him letters every single day, right? Just mailing him letters. Like, every day I'd send him like 15 letters, right? Call me, right? Nothing. And then I went to one of my friends, a guy named Steve, was at a bar, you know, drinking next to a guy, and the guy happened to be Buddha Monk.
Okay.
And Dirty's right hand, and also a rapper. He's in Brooklyn Zoo and was performed every time with Dirty. And you know, my friend says, "Oh, I got a buddy that's trying to get in touch with Dirty because he created a show at VH1. It got greenlit." So Buddha gave him his number to give to me. I call Buddha. Buddha then puts me in touch with Dirty's mom. Right now, mind you, I had already tried to get to prison twice to go see Dirty. The first time I got lost and I didn't get there until after I got there after visiting hours, like 10 minutes late. The second time, it was like in the middle of nowhere. And their visiting hours were so scattered, I didn't make it there on time either. So the third time, so I wound up meeting his mom, and we hit it off, and as well as his stepfather, Frank. We hit it off, and his mom said, "Well, let's go visit him." So I met her at 3:00 in the morning, and the near Time, you know, the Time Warner building in New York, and we took the prison bus to go visit him in jail.
Okay, so VH1 was basically the vehicle to have you have access to the music industry.
Yes, but it's a crazier story than that. So what happens is
exclusive content by the dipshits.